You are watching QTV and thank you so much for joining us yet again on our newscast. The headlines. The Anti-Corruption Commission ACC says it is following with keen interest the recent developments at the Zambia Air Force ZAF. First Republican President Kenneth Kaunda has been urged to seriously consider playing a role in resolving the issue of the Barroso-Land Agreement. Here now is the news in detail. The Anti-Corruption Commission says it is following with keen interest the recent developments at the Zambia Air Force, where Air Force Commander Lieutenant General Eric Chimese has been sent on forced leave. ACC Public Relations Officer Timothy Mono says the Commission will without fail take action if there is any information that will need them to take action. Mr. Mono says the Commission has not yet instituted any investigations at the Zambia Air Force but has taken note of the revelations. The opposition National Democratic Congress (NDC) has called on the Anti-Corruption Commission (ACC) to probe ZAF Commander General Chimese, who is on forced leave for alleged involvement in corruption.
The Commission has taken note of the publicity regarding issues relating to the Zambia Air Force Commander, and we are looking into that, meaning that we are not investigating. We don't just begin investigating. We take note, and if there's information that requires us under our mandate to take action, we take action. So right now we have taken note of all these revelations and what is happening. And we are looking at that.
Yes. So you haven't taken any form of action, like visiting his former office?
No, because
search there?
No. We haven't taken that action.
We're just looking into some.
Maybe other institutions are working because we don't want to duplicate efforts. Yeah. So when we take note, it's a time to begin to liaise with our colleagues to find out who's doing what and so on. So we don't duplicate efforts.
Justice Minister Given Lubinda has noted the need to conduct a review of the recently held by-elections in the country. Mr. Lubinda believes that doing so will help establish the causes of the voter apathy which characterized the by-elections. He notes that a number of reasons have been cited as the cause of the voter apathy by various stakeholders, but that no grouping has so far conducted a review of the by-elections in order to understand the actual causes of the voter apathy. Mr. Lubinda says some of the reasons attributed to voter apathy by stakeholders are mere speculations, hence the need to conduct a review of the by-elections. Meanwhile, Mr. Lubinda has challenged the media to be proactive in sensitizing the public on the importance of casting their votes.
Need for us to really conduct a review of the recently held elections so that we understand the reasons for that voter apathy. There have been many reasons that have been advanced so far, but I don't think anyone has done any kind of scientific research for us to be able to draw informed conclusions. We could speculate, but that will just be speculation. I think that there is need for us to review it. But also, it is important for all of us, especially for you in the press, to get directly involved in sensitizing people. I heard on radio a comment from one NGO whose mandate is to encourage people to vote. And that same organization was blaming government. And yet it is their mandate. The reason they were formed is to go out and sensitize people to vote. And now they're saying the government is at fault. How could government possibly be at fault without the people themselves being at fault for not turning out?
Former Prime Minister under the UNIP government, Malimba Masheke, has observed the need for Zambians to support governance that retains their country's democracy. General Masheke says Zambia must sustain a government of the people, by people and for people. In an interview with QTV News via telephone, General Masheke says contributions of all players towards sustaining democracy of the country should be recognized by other political affiliations. He says this is what Zambians has always been, a one nation. General Masheke, however, notes that a political A political party that is at one time in government should, on the other hand, keep in mind that if it does not satisfy the people, it can put aside in preference for others.
We have to make sure that everybody who has to do with Zambia, who resides in Zambia, who depends on Zambia, support the governance that gives us the democracy we are talking about. We know that as per our motto, we understand and know that democracy is government of the people, by the people, for the people. Therefore, whether you are in opposition, whether you are in the governing party, you can understand that there are other players who you should be able to recognize their contribution. I think this is what we have always been. Whether you are in one party state or you are in multi-party state, others must be given opportunity to play their part. And people must know that if you don't satisfy them, they can deal with you by putting you aside and try somebody else.
First Republican President Kenneth Kaunda has been urged to seriously consider playing a role in resolving the issue of the Barroso-Land Agreement of 1964. Civil rights activist Bren Bachengala thinks that Zambia must utilize the opportunity it still has to resolve the Barroso-Land Agreement issue, while Dr. Kaunda, who was a signatory to it, is still alive. Mr. Changala is concerned that the issue of the agreement does not seem to go away, and therefore Dr. Kaunda can in this case play a major role in resolving it. In an interview with QTV News, Mr. Changala says this is especially that the government appears to be reactive than proactive in dealing with this issue. Mr. Changala says, or he has observed, that government is watching things from a distance instead of providing leadership on how the issue of the Barroso-Land Agreement can be resolved. He says his appeal to government is that it engages the people of Barroso-Land, and he does not think threatening those propagating secession is the answer.
Barroso, as a province, is an integral part of this republic. And one of the signatories to that Barroso agreement is Dr. Kaunda, who is still alive. He can still play a major role in this matter, other than it cropping up, misunderstood. It comes up more often than not in an acrimonious manner. Can we have a finale? Can we meet the agitators of this Barroso secession song, which has been sung for a while and it has lost the chorus? Threatening them is not an answer. Listening to them, I think, is the first step forward. Bring them closer and ask them 1 or 2, 3, 4 questions. Why do you want to leave Zambia and go where?
Acting Deputy Auditor General Sally Ross says Zambia has adequate legislation to carry out performance and environmental audits. Speaking during the International Organizations of Supreme Audit Institutions INTOSAI Development Initiative IDI on Supreme Audit Institutions SAI Fighting Corruption Program, Mrs. Ross says Zambia has continued to notice high and evolving technical demands of these types of audits, and as such, significant resources will continue to be spent on capacity building. She says the Auditor General's Office has a strategic plan for the period 2017 to 2021, which feeds into the operational annual works plans, which are developed using a risk-based audit approach.
So it is important that as we audit, we pick areas that target the development of our country. And under the 7th National Development Plan of our country, it has developmental outcomes in the health sector, education sector, and other various sectors that target the improvement of the lives of our people in Zambia. And therefore, as an office, as we pick these topics and audit them, we should keep it in the back of our mind that we are auditing and helping government to improve the lives of our citizens.
Speaking at the same event, IDR representative Alan Lindiliohu says corruption is a serious crime and a major barrier to economic prosperity, social and all forms of equality, as it erodes trust in the government, affects economic and financial stability, threatens investment in the country, and curtails the fundamental and basic rights of citizens. Mr. Lindoyu says it is for this reason that every society, sector and citizens should be united in the fight against corruption to ensure effective and efficient use of public resources and delivery of public services. He says Supreme Audit Institutions, SAIs, are unique institutions in any governance structure worldwide because they are entrusted with independent examination of the public resources used by the executive.
Besides this, IDI embraced over the last couple of years new areas which are critical to us for SAIs in delivering effectively their mandate and keeping their government accountable, staying relevant and leading by example. All this to make a difference in the life of citizens. Those capacity development areas covers domains like strategic management and performance of SAIs, strengthening SAI independence, building capacities of young leaders, engagement with stakeholders, enhancement of e-learning capacities within SAIs, auditing of sustainable development goals, and last but not the least, the role of SAIs in the fight against corruption. To enhance the effectiveness of SAIs in fighting corruption, the SAI Fighting Corruption program was designed 3 years ago, based on a need assessment through a global survey and a prioritization process. The SAI Fighting Corruption program combines basically 3 main components. The first one involves supporting SAIs in conducting a performance audit of institutional framework for fighting corruption. In this regard, the participating SAIs represented here have been supported over the last 8 months in conducting a performance audit of the frameworks for fighting corruption in the respective countries based on the international standards.
And Anti-Corruption Commission Public Relations Officer Timothy Mono has expressed optimism that the meeting will help in the fight against corruption not only in Zambia but in other countries.
Agreement in which information is passed to the Commission to help in investigations as the audits are happening. So this information sharing process has helped the Anti-Corruption Commission to deal with the corruption whilst the information is still fresh, whilst the audits are happening, as opposed to after the audits have been completed and reports are given. By then, you find that some evidence is lost because you find that the culprits or those involved in the reports, they tend to hide the evidence or make documents go missing. We've had those challenges and we've been working with the Auditor General's Office to ensure that the Memorandum of Understanding actually bears fruit, and to a large extent it is working well.
The Zambian government has affirmed its commitment to supporting initiatives aimed at ensuring peace in the Great Lakes region. Minister of Mines Richard Musukwa says Zambia has and will continue to actively participate in the International Conference on the Great Lakes Region, ICGLR committees. And Mr. Musukwa says the Zambian government is confident that the ICGLR mineral certification mechanism, once fully implemented, will contribute to peace and security in the Great Lakes region. Mr. Musukwa states that it is high time that resources in the region contributed to the development and well-being of its people as opposed to fueling conflicts. He says the government is therefore not only committed to the ICFLR region initiative to fight illegal exploitation of natural resources, but also the elimination of conflicts in the African continent. Mr. Musukwa said this in Lusaka when he opened the 13th meeting of the ICGLR Audit Committee, which runs from the 7th to the 10th of August.
The government of the Republic of Zambia, ladies and gentlemen, is confident that the mineral certification mechanism, once fully implemented, will contribute to peace and security, not only in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, but in the entire Great Lakes region. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Executive Secretary, it is high time now that our natural resources contributed to the development and well-being of our people, instead of fueling conflict among brothers and sisters of the region. In this regard, I wish to reiterate Zambia's commitment to the implementation of not only the Lusaka Declaration on the Regional Initiative to fight against the illegal exploitation of natural resources, but to all other initiatives that our heads of states and governments have endorsed to eliminate conflict in the region and the continent at large. Executive Secretary, the mismatch that exists in our community, where we are heavily endowed with natural resources in terms of poverty, squalor, illiteracy, cannot continue to be entertained. These resources need to upgrade and uplift the living standards of our people than to be used as a tool of oppression and violation of human rights.
Speaking at the same event, ICGLR Executive Secretary Zakari Mburimuita said the meeting is expected to delineate between activities of Regional Audit Committee and other service providers. Ambassador Mburimuita says the delineation that will be agreed upon will be for the good of the regional grouping.
We have a lot of work to do. If the certificates are going to be truly worthwhile and have not just our own, but especially a global recognition, I think a lot more needs to be done just to ensure that the due diligence is done, who is issuing them, who is the custodian of these certificates, what sort of security features do they bear. So I think we owe it to ourselves to ensure that we have a credible process, credible certificates that we can put the reputation of the 12 member states behind it. The development of a regional ASM gold strategy is going on very well. ASM gold experts will be meeting next month to finalize the development work. As I tend towards conclusion, it is envisaged that both the revised RCM manual and the ASM strategy be presented to the ministers in charge of mines at their 5th meeting, which is scheduled to be held in Brazzaville, in the Republic of Congo, in November this year.
The United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, has noted the need for increased participation of media in providing evidence-based information to communities and people affected by climate change. In a speech read on her behalf by UNDP Programmes Analyst Eric Chipeta at a one-day media training workshop on the National Adaptation Plan process, UNDP Country Director Mandisa Mosholugu noted the need for concerted efforts from all stakeholders in integrating climate change adaptations, initiatives and interventions. Ms. Mosholugu states that the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals calls for addressing the threats of climate change by building resilience and ensuring that information is given out to the public. She is hopeful that the interaction with the media will help enhance public awareness on the National Adaptation Plan process, which aims at contributing to attainment of SDGs on eliminating hunger and SDG 13 on acting on climate change.
A number of initiatives have been put in place by the government with support from development partners, as you may be aware, through the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources, which is the lead institution on implementing of the climate change policy. An app is being developed, drawing its mandate from the National Climate Change Response Strategy and National Policy on Climate Change of 2016. Sector NAPs in agriculture and health are progressing well, while other sector NAPs in energy and water are in the initial phases. The 7th National Development Plan also recognizes that climate change is an area that requires urgent interventions, which is a milestone to ensure a coordinated approach towards building the country's resilience and reducing its vulnerability to climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, The importance of showcasing or providing evidence for these efforts and initiatives cannot be overemphasized. Zambia as a country has lacked the provision of evidence-based information to communities and people affected by climate change, thereby affecting the adoption rates of initiatives and modern technologies such as climate-smart agriculture, natural regeneration, and alternative sources of energy. It is very difficult to convince the farmers on new interventions if we cannot showcase the evidence that the alternative approach can work better.
And Minister of Agriculture Deputy Director, Department of Agriculture, Stanislas Chisakuta, stated that engagement with the media is a perfect avenue for spreading the public evidence-based messages on the risks and impacts of climate change and associated effects it has on food security.
Zambia has experienced some climatic hazards over several decades now. The most serious being droughts, seasonal flash floods, extreme temperatures, and prolonged dry spells. Some of these, especially droughts and floods, have increased in frequency, intensity, and magnitude over the last two decades, and have adversely impacted on food and water security, water quality, energy, and sustainable livelihoods of many, especially the rural communities. Dealing with these hazards requires concerted efforts from all concerned stakeholders. And one way of doing this is through enhanced communication and information disseminations of lessons learned and on the risks and impacts of climate change. The goal of the National Adaptation Plans project is to integrate climate change concerns related to agriculture-based livelihoods within existing national planning and budgeting processes.
The ruling Patriotic Front, PF, has adopted Oxencio Banda as its candidate for the September 6th Kasenengwa parliamentary by-election. Briefing the media, PF Secretary General Davis Mwila has disclosed that 17 candidates applied for adoption, but the party has settled for Mrs. Banda. Mr. Mwila says those who were not picked should, however, remain loyal and support the candidate the party has chosen. And Mr. Mwila has reiterated that his party will ensure that no political violence is recorded during and after the by-elections. The Kasenengwa parliamentary seat fell vacant following the death of then Area Member of Parliament and Minister of Gender, Victoria Kalima, 2 months ago.
The Central Committee met this morning to consider adoptions for Kasenengwa constituency and 5 other local government by-elections to be held on 6th September 2018. Following extensive deliberations, the Central Committee considered the 17 names of aspiring candidates who applied for Kasenengwa constituency. I wish to announce that the Central Committee today has adopted Mr. Oxencio Banda as the party's candidate for Kasenengwa constituency. Let me state that it is the position of the Central Committee that all who had applied to contest Kasenengwa constituency are expected to remain loyal by understanding that there can only be one candidate at any given time. We therefore urge all aspiring candidates to emulate the spirit of the 31 Lusaka mayoral candidates who regrouped and removed as a team after the adoption of Lusaka Mayor, His Worship Mausap. We did not see any independent candidates in the Lusaka mayoral race, and we do not expect to have any independent candidate in Kasenengwa. We are aware that some opposition parties are waiting like ventures to entice those who have not adopted this time around.
Some opposition political parties have welcomed the conviction and sentencing to 18 years imprisonment of former Ministry of Health Chief Human Resource Officer Henry Kapoko and 4 others for corruption and theft involving 6 million kwacha. The sentence includes 5 years each for theft, 5 years for money laundering, and a further 9 years for theft by public servant. UPND Secretary General Stephen Katuka says the trial and sentencing of Kapoko and 4 others for corruption and the theft of public funds should serve as a lesson to government officers against engaging in corruption. Mr. Katuka says such a punishment would serve as a deterrent measure for Zambians who want to engage in corruption, irrespective of their positions. He has told Q News that public officers should understand that their job is a calling and that they have a duty to serve the people of Zambia.
For us, that was a good lesson to all those who have long fingers. You see, public resources do not belong to an individual. You can't help yourself to public resources. This matter has been dragging on for a long time, and finally it is concluded. And it should send a message to those who are still serving in government that they should not tamper with public resources, at any level that is. Whether you are the topmost, whatever your position is in government, you should know that the money you are dealing with is public fund. It belongs to every Zambian. Even those that are not yet born, it's their money. So you cannot take advantage of that and convert it to be your own money. So it's a warning to those that in future they should not tamper with public resources.
And Third Liberation Movement President Enoch Tonga says the sentence is a great step in the fight against corruption. Mr. Tonga says the convictions send a strong message that no one is above the law. And the new Congress Party President Peter Chanda says the sentence is a signal to the public, especially those who handle public funds, that they should desist from misusing them. Mr. Chanda says the sentence further instills confidence in the country's criminal justice system that those public officers stealing funds will face the law.
When the Auditor General's report is published, it is the civil servant that are in charge of dispensing and managing the funds who are always culprits. And we want to state that the Zambian people, as well as the citizenry in particular, and civil servants, should be able to be wary of the fact that once they are given a mandate to manage the affairs or the financial affairs of the country in the respective ministry, they should do it with integrity, honesty, and decency. It is sad that Henry Kapoko has been convicted, but finally we want to state that this should serve as a lesson. Let's be able to root out corruption at all levels.
The Lusaka Water and Storage Company says a rupture on the main water supply line near the University Teaching Hospital UTH traffic lights has further delayed the resumption of normal water supply to various parts of Lusaka. Company Marketing and Public Relations Manager Patson Piri says the rupture occurred in the early hours of today as water was about to be restored to various parts of the city that have in the past days experienced water shutdowns and interruptions. He has named the affected areas as Villa Elizabetha, Mandevu, Matero, Emersdale, City Centre, Industrial Area and surrounding areas which had been experiencing interruptions since last week Friday. Mr. Piri has advised residents in the affected areas to exercise patience as normal water supply will resume as soon as possible. He states that the company has in the meantime extended the provision of water through bowsers as a short-term intervention. The Zambia Public Procurement Authority ZPPA has assured suppliers and bidders in areas where there is no internet that they will not be disadvantaged in the government tendering process. ZPPA Electronic Government Procurement EGP Principal Officer Malcolm Nkowani says this is as far as using the EGP system is concerned. Mr. Nkowani has disclosed to QTV News that ZPPA and the Smart Zambia are already working hand in hand in ensuring equal access to information on the government tendering process. He states that this means that those areas without internet facilities, Smart Zambia is helping out by providing the service. Mr. Nkowani is hopeful that with the passage of time, all areas in the country that have no internet will be connected.
Currently, ZPPA and Smart Zambia are working hand in hand. So in those areas where there is no internet facilities, Smart Zambia is helping, and with the passage of time, almost all these towns will be connected to the internet.
Eastern Province Permanent Secretary Chanda Kasolo says the construction of an industrial yard for youths and women in the province has formally begun. Mr. Kasolo says the yard is being built in Chipata. In an interview with QTV News, Mr. Kasolo notes that the purpose of the industrial compound is to encourage youths to form cooperatives and come up with ideas of added value manufacturing. Mr. Kasolo says, for example, for youths that are making chairs along roadsides, what will be done for them is buying equipment and taking them for training. He says this is in order that they acquire knowledge and skills to produce the best furniture they can, after which they will be given an industrial unit and mentorship for a period of some time. Mr. Kasolo explains that the idea for this is so that they become self-sustaining.
For instance, at the moment there are some youths that are making chairs on the streets and so on. What we'll do is we'll buy them the equipment that they require. We'll take them for training to provide them with knowledge and experience to produce the best furniture they can. And then we'll come and give them an industrial unit and mentor them for a period of time so that they can become self-sustaining. Now that may seem a very small thing, but you think about it. If we do that for a number of industries, somebody may decide to add value to mangoes and produce mango juice, mango pulp, etc. And mango pulp is just not for consumption as a food. It is used in making medicines as well. So things like that. Those are the things that we're going to do in Eastern Province. But I tell you, there are frustrations with all these industrialization things we're doing. We are trying to team up with at least one province in China to train up, not just in terms of politics and social.
That exciting development concludes our news, but before I take a run, here's a recap of stories in the headlines. The Anti-Corruption Commission, ACC, says it is following with keen interest the recent developments at the Zambia Air Force, ZAF. First Republican President Kenneth Kaunda has been urged to seriously consider playing a role in resolving the issue of the Beresaland Agreement. That will do for the news. Thank you so much for your time. Bye-bye. God bless.